today features a story so incredible, so improbable, that it had never been seen before and has never happened since. Hi, I'm Chris May, host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast from the Weather Network in Canada. As I mentioned yesterday, in 1848, a very unique and specific chain of events came together at the same time to create a spectacle that has likely only happened one time since the last ice age. And it happened in Niagara Falls this day in weather history. Gotta admit, this has been on my TDIWH calendar since I first started putting this podcast together back in late 2019. It was the day Niagara Falls lost the falls part of that great name, because the water suddenly stopped literally falling over the falls. In 1848, a very unique spectacle occurred which some people, these would be your typical Darwin Award nominees, consider to be a harbinger of the end of the world, when the water ceased to flow over the Horseshoe Falls in Niagara Falls, Canada. There was, of course, a perfectly logical explanation for it. After an exceptionally cold winter, during a warm spell in March, and a strong easterly wind, the thick ice buildup from Lake Erie had begun to break up. Lake Erie is the shallowest of the 5 Great Lakes, and it is prone to freezing over first and thawing pretty quickly, too, from the sun's heat and rainfall in the spring. Now, because of how sudden this was, it created a naturally strong current, and that drew the ice into the mouth of the Niagara River, where it began to pile up. Remember, the wind was directing it together and also enhancing the flow. But we see ice jams like this a lot every year. So I thought, surely the thundering waters of the mighty Niagara River would be too strong for this to occur. No. The ice kept piling on and formed a dam between Buffalo and Fort Erie, cutting off the flow of water into the river and over the falls for a period of 30 hours. Think of it now. For that creepy period in time, the Niagara Falls fell silent. But what happened next eclipses this rare natural wonder by its sheer level of improbability and actual potential insanity. And that is what I'm going to tell you about next. But first, remember that this day in weather history can be enjoyed a number of ways. Right now, you are listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider, but there is also the daily podcast video short. They are shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective, and oftentimes they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened, in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. All right, here we go. The reason you have to watch today's podcast video short is so that you can see the pictures that remain from this mind-bending occurrence. On the night of March 29th, and in one of the most incredible stories to emerge from this event, hundreds of locals picked up lit torches and decided that it would be pretty cool to walk across the floor of the Niagara River along the brink that is normally the drop-off to the Horseshoe and American Falls. I'm not kidding you. This really happened. People with brains, thinking it was safe to now walk across what they had only known as being this powerful force of nature, actually traversed the stretch between the two nations while tempting fate along a barrier that they knew full well was not supposed to be like this. As a precautionary measure, I'm going to only assume because of Border Patrol, and likely because they too thought that this was a wicked cool opportunity, the U.S. cavalry rode back and forth on horses as well. Now, I know that it's only 1848 at this time, but our species had already been considered, albeit possibly prematurely, an intelligent species for tens of thousands of years. Did anyone walking across that precipice think to look upriver to consider possibly, I don't know, maybe even out loud, hey, so what happens if that ice jam breaks and the water starts flowing again? The riverbed remained dry until the afternoon of March 30th, this day in weather history, but winds will change direction, obviously. And when they did, the ice jam weakened, the chunks broke up, and began to disperse, and the thundering flow of water in the Niagara River soon returned to normal. But for those who witnessed that, and for those who walked across this miracle, they would go down in history as the only ones ever to see this, because it has never happened since this day in weather history. Tomorrow is March 31st, and again we are about to turn the page on our calendar to another month. For tomorrow we stay in the 19th century, actually. We're traveling to Paris, France in the year 1889. It was here that a great celebration was being planned and a contest would be held to design a showpiece to mark the occasion. This showpiece, however, would go on to be the most visited tourist attraction on Earth. And what initially saved it from the scrapyard was the weather. And that story is tomorrow on This Day in Weather History with me, your host, Chris May.